welcome everybody. I'm Mark Fox, CEO of NetEvents, and delighted to have you along here today for our CIO roundtable on business continuity and collaboration. Brad, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Yes, indeed, I am Brad Casemore, Research VP for Data Center Networks and Multi-Cloud Networks at IDC. And I have a distinguished panel with me today for today's roundtable. We have Kevin Herrin, who is Vice President, Infrastructure Platform Engineering at Dell Technologies. We have Veresh Sita, who is Chief Digital Information Officer at F5 Networks. We have Dan Krantz, who is Vice President and CIO at Keysight Technologies. We have Bill Miller, who is Chief Information Officer at NetApp. And we have Russ. We have Russ Currie, who is Vice President of Enterprise Strategy at NetSCOUT. We have Christina Kite, who is Vice President, Global Business Strategy and Analytics at Oracle. And we have Pathmal Gunawardana. I hope I said that okay, Pathmal, who is Head of Americas at TATA Communications. So it's a great panel, and we're going to have an extremely stimulating and I think interesting discussion for you today. And let's see, we'll move this forward to there we go. So today I just want to frame the discussion before our panelists provide their perspectives and their insights. Just a few slides to cue it up for you. This is based on, IDC has been doing a rolling survey all through the current pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis. And we've received some interesting responses from enterprise respondents. These are enterprises across a range of vertical markets, how they're coping with the crisis, how they're reprioritizing their IT investments during the crisis, and also how they see an emergence from the crisis as we move on to what IDC and others are calling the next normal. So it's all about business continuity and collaboration, how you keep your business going during a crisis, how you ensure that that you have the collaboration platforms capabilities in place to ensure employee engagement and productivity. And it requires, I think, thinking in the long term about, as we move into this next normal, how can we move beyond having contingency plans that may or may not be put into productive effect and move towards something that is more like a continuous preparedness. So as we move into the next slide, I'll dive right in with some of the data. We've seen profound changes globally in the last few months, and that's probably an understatement. 2020 has been like no other year in living memory. And even if we compare what the IMF and others have called the Great Lockdown, which is what we're living through now, to the previous crisis, which was the global financial crisis in 2009, this has been a very different type of crisis. And you can see from this slide that regardless of where you are in the world, it has affected everybody. You can see the data here from the sources IMF and the World Economic Outlook. The global financial crisis, I certainly don't want to play down its effects, but it was a very different type of crisis. For one thing, it wasn't a health crisis as well as an economic crisis. It was a financial crisis, and it manifested differently across the world, and you can see it on this slide. If we move to the next slide, we can look at what we're going through now, right? The crisis has hit, and when the crisis hits, this is you might call it a technology journey to recovery map, where you have the initial crisis and your focus is on business continuity. You go through a slowdown and you're looking at an ROI focus, cost control focus, and ensuring that that the technologies in which you're investing and implementing are providing an ROI. And then you look at getting into a more normal cadence of operational resilience as you move through a recessionary period. Then as you begin to, this is a U-shaped curve, as you begin to ascend that curve, you're looking at accelerating to, you're looking at investing to accelerate your way into growth. And then you want to move towards recovery and innovation. We're still very much in the early stages of this. We're in this crisis slowdown period. And obviously the focus right now is on business continuity. And if we move to the next slide, we can see some interesting data from the rolling survey I talked about. And this is a survey that we do on COVID-19's impact on IT spending. This is from late March, this particular snapshot, 103 respondents. And we asked about, due to COVID-19 and the need for new technology and changes to the working model of some organizations, which of the following tech investments do you think will benefit most from increased demand? So it's, asking people to project and to predict. And you can see there's a range of them here. And I really want you to think about this as a continuum where you have the placement of applications, where applications reside on one end, and you have where they're consumed and how they're used on the others. And you can see, if you think about it in that context, all of these things begin to make sense on that spectrum. You have cloud computing and cloud software, so IaaS as well as SaaS represented here. You have, data security, which is everywhere. But then you have all of the endpoint items in terms of workforce performance management, enterprise social networks for collaboration and communication, employee engagement tools to make sure employees are still engaged as they become teleworkers, remote learning and training. All of these things are important, and it is very much a continuum. And we can see how much things have changed on the endpoints on this next slide. This is the impact of COVID-19 on working from home. And it's a question that we ask: what percentage of your organization's employees are working from home, or do you anticipate will be working from home out in 2021? So there's pre-COVID, you can see on the far left-hand side of the screen. And there was a very small proportion of employees who were regularly working from home. And then you can see now, this was in the midst of the crisis. This was like, I think an April snapshot. And obviously you've got a significant percentage of employees working from home, including a very significant percentage that's more than 75% of overall employees. And then there's also an even larger complement that's at between 50 and 75% of employees and so forth. But even if we roll this forward, and this is why we talk about the next normal, even as respondents looked out to 2021, you do not see a return to the pre-COVID chart at the far left. You still see a very significant number of employees working from home. Some organizations have found that, at least from a productivity standpoint, it's worked quite well for them. Mileage varies, of course, but this is a new world, and obviously from an IT perspective, it requires certain investments and a reorientation of kind of a worldview on technology and how it contributes to the business. And I think now I just want to make some points before I turn it over to our illustrious panel. On the next slide, I think you'll see some IDC conclusions that we found from our rolling survey. First of all, the COVID-19 crisis is leaving a permanent mark. Enterprises now fully appreciate that unforeseen events can and do arise, right? We always knew they could, but we've seen firsthand through the current pandemic just how immense and serious they can be. They can derail business operations, and unprepared organizations obviously will suffer the most. There are degrees of preparedness, but you want to be as prepared as you can be. Second point, business continuity and resilience should not be limited to a contingency plan that sits in a drawer. It needs to be more of a preparedness posture that is actionable at any given time, whenever one of these crises may surface. And it should give organizations the agility, flexibility, and responsiveness that they'll need, and indeed the resilience they'll need in an unpredictable world. Finally, investments need to occur in a wide range of technologies. Remember that gamut or spectrum I talked about earlier, spanning the spectrum of digital business continuity. And they need to be emphasized well into the future, right? This isn't something that we can just drop a few months from now. I think we realize that this preparedness needs to be a continuous posture. And it needs to address not only where the applications reside in an increasingly distributed world where cloud, IaaS, and SaaS are being leveraged more extensively, but also to how they're flexibly accessed and used collaboratively, by your employees at endpoints. And of course, this has to be secure as well. Brings up a whole range of challenges. And I think now, as we move to the next slide and we turn to the panel, We're going to discuss this in a chronological way in terms of how the panelists responded to the immediate crisis, when the crisis arose, and how they responded to it organizationally in terms of the IT technologies that they put in place, some of the short-term priorities as we climb out of this, and then long-term lessons that they may have been able to derive from the crisis in terms of that continuous preparedness that I mentioned earlier. So we'll move now to discussing the immediate crisis response. And I wonder now, as we turn to our panelist, we'll operate in terms of how the panelists appear on the screen. Kevin, I wonder if you could give your perspective on how Dell Technologies responded when the crisis surfaced, and how you were able to scramble to maintain business operations and continuity.
Sure. So at Dell, we have a fairly robust crisis management team structure that gets called across the organization. And so that was called up, and we started working on what are we going to do about this problem early on when it was really impacting China more than anywhere else. We, of course, do have business interests there and a lot of employees there. So we were very focused on China and how to deal with China from a technology perspective. I own the infrastructure at Dell, so we were very focused on our networks there, our VPNs there, so people could go to work at home. We were scrambling to deal with how do we, if we run out of capacity in China, because we didn't design our networks for everyone to work from home at the same time, how do we get those users connected to nearby VPN capabilities in Asia to keep our business operations moving forward.
Excellent. Did you leverage any? Were you looking more at VPN connections to VPN concentrators? Were SD-WAN overlays part of that, or?
There were a lot of what really helped us here was a big investment we've been making in SD-WAN across the world, and we have been replacing a lot of MPLS with internet, and so when we do that, we were able to get, in a lot of cases, almost 10x the bandwidth for that we had before for even better cost. So the SD-WAN thing was a play to use our own technology. It was one of our, obviously, I'm sure there's other folks who would say the same thing about their technologies and their companies, but we're big believers in using our own technologies and proving the point, and we got out on the edge and started doing it, and it's been a great project. Helped us be well positioned to take almost 100% of our employees to work from home very quickly once this thing kind of started breaking out of China.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And eating your own dog food is always great in terms of giving
Drinking
customers
your own
confidence.
we like to say sometimes.
Yes, yeah, it's a little more attractive. Veresh, I wonder if you could give a perspective from F5 in terms of what you saw and how you responded.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, right out of the gates, our thinking was to be quick, to be decisive, and to be transparent. I remember very early days. I was driving back home from a ski resort with the family on a Sunday evening, and I had to actually pull up into a supermarket parking lot to take a call with my leadership team, where we actually invoked our crisis management and business continuity plan. And I remember opening the call by saying, I hope this call turns out to be much ado about nothing, but I'd rather be abundantly cautious than not. And it turns out that we did that fairly early on, and one of the best decisions we could have made. The first thing that we did was establish a guiding principle that our entire response plan was going to be governed by. We're a global company, and to roll out procedures, policies on global scale immediately is going to be tough. So we really came up with a guideline and an operating philosophy that we called our human first approach, and that every decision that we were going to make going forward was going to be based on a human first approach. And so that gave license to, for example, our frontline salespeople that were trying to make a month or make a quarter, that they had the license to take a human first approach in terms of their personal health, their personal safety, and also doing the right thing by our customers. And so if it meant we missed a month from a financial perspective or missed a quarter from a financial perspective, we were going to be okay with that from a company perspective, as long as we took a human first approach. We moved quickly to implementing office by office guidelines around working from home, etc. Of course, working with local authorities, local governments, local leaders, and peer level companies within the different geographies to implement work from home practices. We had to scramble pretty quickly to enable the effectively 100% work from home for our entire organization, making sure that we were provisioning the appropriate tools, technologies, and equipment for people to do that. And as soon as we were able to establish that our entire global workforce was safe, was well, and was able to continue to work from home, we made sure we extended the human force approach to our customers, and recognizing the technology that we provide as F5, as a leader in the networking space and security space, our ability to enable companies who were dealing with trying to enable large volumes of people to work from home was high. So we immediately focused on that and removed every type of roadblock that we could in terms of enabling customers to be able to support them to help their workforce to work from home. So our entire initial response was based on enabling our business continuity plans pretty quickly, but really putting a overarching lens of human first in every decision that we made.
That's very important. The human first precept is a recognition that the crisis was disruptive to every aspect of life, right? Not just the work life, but personal life as well. So it's a good insight. Dan, I wonder if you could provide your perspective from what you saw at Keysight.
Yeah, so for Keysight, this was kind of a deja vu moment for us, not with the pandemic sense, but in late 2017, our headquarters are in Santa Rosa, California, and there was a wildfire, the Tubbs wildfire, that came racing down the hills and really took out our corporate headquarters. Significant fire damage. This is where not only our headquarters, but our fab and our tech center, hub of global operations, and we had to exercise crisis management back then, and did a pretty significant retrospective on what would happen at scale globally with our multinational company if this occurs anywhere else. Not knowing that a pandemic was soon going to be what we're faced with. But the good news is we had really dusted off our crisis response, again, about how to be employee first, put employee health and safety number one priority, and reimagining what would we need to do at every location around the world with that as our number one priority for whatever crisis may hit, be it China or Europe or other parts of Asia. So as this unfolded in January, we just put that into motion, sent everybody to work from home, probably before the local authorities required it. We had already re-engineered our entire global network to be SD-WAN. We'd rethought our whole VPN architecture, just in case something like this were to happen. But we couldn't kind of imagine in January that this was actually happening. So we kind of assumed this is a one-off. This is a China-only thing. Good thing this isn't global yet. And then South Korea started to hit just a few weeks later. And then that's when we really kicked into high gear to say, this is going to spread. This is indeed going to be global. This is not one facility of ours. This very well could be every facility on the planet that is going to need to work from home. And we had to go into hyperdrive to really make sure we put all of the actions into motion to help everyone basically connect and just work remotely.
Absolutely. No, and you're absolutely, this is such a connected world today, not just in terms of technologies that we're talking about, but obviously transport too. And these viruses certainly got around this virus certainly got around the world in incredible time, right? It just spread at such a rate. It was hard for all of us to keep up, I think. Bell, from the NetApp perspective, I wonder if you could provide some insights into whether your experience was similar to the ones we've already heard about, or whether you had something that was particular to your organization and requirements.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Yeah, NetApp is a large technology company. We span cloud utilities and on-prem resources, data centers around data management, data storage. So we're kind of a tech company, a pure tech company that really builds and sells software. So let me tell you a couple stories about this that I think are really interesting. The first one is it all starts and ends with the customer, right? I think most of us share that view. It's our raison d'etre, is that we provide value to the customer. So we have a pretty significant call center and customer support center, interestingly enough, in North Carolina, in the center of North Carolina. So we had been prepared due to previous hurricane evacuations, due to coastal hurricanes in the Atlantic season, where we basically had to lift and move our North American customer service operations to be able to allow these agents to work from home, work from the road, wherever they were during these evacuations due to hurricanes. So actually, the shift due to the pandemic to take the diaspora of those service resources and continue to function was a natural outgrowth of some of the things we'd done before. So, it's a case of not all crises are the same, but they provide you with that muscle memory to deal with that crisis and figure out how you're going to deal with the next crisis. So that was really helpful to us so as not to impact our customers. And of course, a lot of customers were going through their own throes and challenges and needed that reassurance and that close contact with their support partners during this period of time. So that's a really great example. I'm going to give you another one that never occurred to any of us and occurred during this pandemic. India was hit particularly hard in their lockdowns in their cities. And most of you who are familiar with Indian operations know that several of the cities literally locked down street traffic. We have a major presence in our Bangalore, India office, and people could not get the permits to go out on the streets to go to the office for any circumstances at all for several weeks due to the authorities not wanting the spread of the pandemic. We continued to hire and onboard employees in India during this crisis. And we actually went through about a 3-week period where we were hiring some experienced personnel as well as some new college grads. We could literally not get them a personal computer during that period of time. But yet we wanted them to onboard. We wanted to keep up the momentum of the hire in the onboarding process. We have what we call a NetApp virtual desktop, which is really a cloud-based utility for a virtualized, secure, enclosed desktop that protects our IP. And we were able to use that cloud utility to drop that image remotely on laptops that these Indian employees had. In a couple of cases, these were laptops that came with new college grads that they had used in college productively. We were able to drop that image on those machines and get those people working with our software tools during the early stages of this pandemic. And to be able to do that in the outskirts of a city like Bangalore during this crisis really talks about the new world order in how we're operating today. So some fascinating lessons learned there. And then the third thing I share, and I'm probably not alone in this and love to hear what the other panelists think. We're largely a software development company, even though we deal with data center. 95% of our asset value and IP is in the software that goes into operating systems and utilities. We actually looked statistically at a lot of our engineering tools and platforms. We looked at code check-in, we looked at code checkout, we looked at code progression, we looked at lines of code produced. And we did this for the first couple of months of the pandemic, and we actually saw a material statistical improvement in productivity of our engineering teams during this period of time. Unbelievable and undeniable. And part of it, I think part of it is, everybody proving to themselves that, look, I'm going to be productive in this environment. I can be as productive, if not more productive in this environment. I'm going to prove it to myself. But I think there was more to it than that. I think there's a compression in time that goes with not walking building to building, conference room to conference room, going to the coffee klatch and having a discussion, and people moderating and managing their time over more than that 8-hour in the workplace day, working it across the day that makes sense to them, maybe 12, 15 hours when they're at home, and to be able to modulate that effectively. And so we actually have seen engineering productivity increases, and that will not be lost on the management team as we look at future posturing. So just some real interesting stories there, Brad, I wanted to share with the community.
Yeah, great perspectives, Bill. And certainly The commutes are much shorter too, right there. Walking
Yeah,
through the
hey,
house.
Brad, some of us had trouble making it from the, from the kitchen to our home office in time to get that first meeting, getting a little lax there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks very much. Russ, similar perspective from NetScout, anything that was a variation on the themes we've heard about now, or did you see some common challenges?
No, pretty similar actually, and a lot of what Bill said rings home to, the longer days and the way that people are adjusting to the environment. And it really is, you get done what you need to get done when you need to get it done, right? So you kind of take that approach. We were lucky at NetScout. We had just finished a major redesign of our network, going to an SD-WAN implementation and an implementation into a colo. So we kind of got in front of the curve. We were very fortunate. We did that all in 19. So we were pretty robust in terms of our compute and networking capabilities. But in my role at NetScout, I also get to work very closely with our customers and get some of the insights that they see. And it was very interesting. Right after the crisis really happened and everybody went into lockdown, it created a great challenge for folks to get remote access turned up and make sure that they had the capacity and the capability to handle this new remote workforce. And an awful lot of our customers are financials, and you tend to have a limited amount of remote workforce in those environments. We have one of our customers that basically provisioned VDI access to 1,100 users over the course of a day. Well, in one day's time, they had to move to an 11,000 user VDI environment. So, this is just, it's stunning. All of a sudden you have 217,000 users coming in remotely. Some of the big organizations that are out there. So just the stunning amount of activity that went along with this was very hard for people to address, but they did. And I think that the interesting thing that came back is most of them said, we're running hot, but we're stable. And that was kind of the best that anybody could hope for. And then over time, what we started to see too is there's a change also in the security angle. We're starting to see a little bit more targeted DDoS attacks towards the VPN resources and the like. They tend to be smaller in scale, but very, very focused. So these are real challenges for folks to ensure that they're able to protect themselves in those environments, and for that kind of more targeted attack where they were pretty well protected on the e-business side because you kind of got that from your content delivery networks or whomever. But now it's really, as we take a look at the private IP space and how do I protect that? That's a challenge as well.
Yeah. So even the cyber attackers have adapted to the
Absolutely.
to the new reality. Absolutely.
And it gives the gamer kids a new target.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably not good, but
right, exactly.
Yeah. Christina, I wonder from your perspective as global business strategy and analytics at Oracle, do you have a different take on what happened and how Oracle responded to it?
Well, I echo a lot of what my colleagues have already mentioned. Maybe a couple things that I'll add from more of a business angle or view. Oftentimes when a crisis hits, no one will fault you for your response as long as you have a plan. And in this case, I think we had multiple plans. If we really step back, even though this is a pandemic and has always been identified by our insurers, for those that do really follow their insurers' risk maps, a pandemic was always something that was at the far right, low frequency, high severity. But it's been on all the risk maps, Zurich, AIG, for at least 2 decades. So we've always known we've lived with this risk. But what we may not have known until we absolutely had to execute some of our plans was how much interdependency there is within and among this particular risk. So for example, we looked at number 1, employees first, customers, and its suppliers. So that triage absolutely was true. However, when we look at a pandemic, your continuity plan for succession planning becomes very important because we really didn't know, based upon this pandemic, would we actually have a loss of life? to some of our employees, and how would we leverage our succession plans? Number two, if you look at things like people working from home, workers' compensation, how do you make sure your employees are not only productive, but they're safe? So you have to consider those risks. Third, someone mentioned, I think it was Russ, security. How do you look at breaches, security breaches, and what is your response to a security breach? These are things that are often true. Bioterrorism, at one point, how could you also look at your continuity plans and how you would address bioterrorism? There are aspects of this particular risk that are multi-threaded. And I think that's something that I'm really proud of Oracle and the way we looked at it very critically, very systemically. Some of the things that I saw us do that maybe we didn't mention is number one, communication. How does the organization communicate, and how do we leverage everything from video to town halls to Ask Me Anything forums so our employees have a voice and can literally be heard, and we can absolutely talk to them. Second, our HR organization not only leveraged our human capital management software to actually weather through this, and we still are, but they also really were very proactive at having different forums, different webcasts on working from home, looking at dealing with or balancing work life, having specific medical advisors coming in. And I really appreciated that focus on our people, because if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers. And we're all here using Zoom, and Zoom is one of our customers. So very, very important, Oracle's responsibility that some of our customers are the front line. And we have to make sure we're there for our customers. And that first and foremost means we have to take care of our employees so they can take care of the customer, as well as how do we make sure that we build customer and employee loyalty throughout this period. I think the last risk that we didn't mention is creditor risk. How can we also look at that last risk? There are going to be some organizations that literally aren't going to be able to pay their bills. How do you look at credit risk, and how do you manage all of these different risks from a systemic perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great observation regarding the organizations that have really suffered a lot of hardship during this period, right? And we've done surveys where you can see certain vertical markets, and obviously those that depend more on human interaction and human exchange. You think about transportation, you think about hospitality and so forth. A lot of those sectors have been hit particularly hard during this crisis. So it's a great observation. Pathmal, I know TATA, obviously a worldwide company. You're head of Americas, but you belong to a company that operates worldwide. What did you see when this crisis hit, and how did TATA respond to it?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, Brad, listening to the esteemed colleagues on this panel. Very similar experience. So when this hit, we had two parallel tracks. One is our employees, their safety and health, and our customers, equally important, right? And as a digital ecosystem enabler, a lot of our customers, actually all of the companies that are represented on this panel, we one way, shape, or form do business with you in every part of the world. And how do we serve our customers, especially for their requirements? And then with our employees, how do we make sure that business continuity happens? As Veresh talked about, the empowerment went down, all the way down in the organization to the account manager level to make sure, let's do what's right for the customer, right? Dan talked about the fire in Santa Rosa, Bill talked about the hurricanes, Kevin talked about the China. Look, I don't think there's any statistical models that define the situation we are at, because this is truly a global pandemic, right? All the other events, we were prepared in isolation. Okay, if a hurricane hits, it's in one country. Doesn't hit the entire world at the same time. This came as a domino effect, right? It starts with China, going to South Korea, India, US, etc. And so as a global provider, presence in 160 countries in the world. And when the customers are calling us up and saying, I need bandwidth here, I need to increase my IP ports over there, and with our center of gravity from operational perspective centered in our headquarter location in India, and Bill talked a little bit about how the India situation evolved, managing through that and the regulatory and the government restrictions, the constraints. It was truly an experience that I don't think we ever could have defined before this happened. So I was very pleased with how the interdependencies between our partners worked out. I think the entire industry came together with the two parallel track, the customer first and employee first. So I think that open-mindedness where we put behind all the financial and all that stuff, but stood up for the moment was truly exemplary. And it's a big lessons learned for all of us, in my point of view, and how we collectively manage through within the ecosystem to help each other out.
That's a good point, given where TATA is in the industry. As you said, you work with many, if not all, of the other organizations represented here in terms of providing solutions for your customers and theirs. And it's an interesting perspective. Thank you for that. Now we're going to move to how priorities have changed as a result of the crisis in terms of, how you allocate your budgets for IT and IT infrastructure and tools and collaboration and so forth. We'll go back to the panel now, and we'll go in the opposite direction. We'll start with Pathmal now. What have you seen from TATA's perspective in terms of, and responding, I suppose, to your customers in terms of what sorts of priorities they have now as they kind of work through this and get to the other side?
Yeah. Thank you, Brad. So our portfolio consists of 4 pillars: network, cloud, UCC, and mobility, IoT. And on the network cloud side, I think everybody's moving to the cloud, right? So that's a given in a situation like this. And one thing we've seen is many of our customers were building networks to connect their office locations and optimize all of that. And we never planned to have our entire workforce working from home. Yeah. And that brings a whole different set of challenges. The endpoint security, the VDIs, and all that is stuff that comes together, right? And how do we package that solution to have all your workloads, all your apps running out of the cloud, and optimize that so that people can work from home and drive SAP HANA and all that stuff in a remote location. Workforce experience, customer experience with contact centers, etc. And so that's a trend that we saw. I think with all of you would agree with work from home brought a different set of challenges, and that's a trend that we see. And I don't think also going forward, that's going to change, right? On your slide, I think 2 or 3, you talked about, Brad, how the going into next year it's going to look like. So that's one area. On the UCC side, on the collaboration perspective, right? We are here on a video call. That also was a trend that we saw in the industry. How to enable your workforce to work from home? How do you get your customers to work from home? The sales motion that we used to see in the past, where you go out and meet a customer face to face, the business is still continuous, right? So so all of our roadmaps, all of the customers' roadmaps that we've seen, we saw three stages. One was the customers who already were in cloud, so that was a very easy transition for them. The others who had a roadmap, who had milestones, going into cloud and enabling that all the apps and everything, they had to just compress the timelines and get the ball rolling on that. And then there's a third category who is still at the early phase in thinking through, conceptualizing, and building their vision and strategy on the IT roadmap. I think they were forced in and accelerate the roadmaps in order to accommodate the evolving situation. And then when you go to IoT mobility side, especially in the industrial manufacturing side, the factories now are opening up. How do we manage the social distancing with the factory flow, worker safety? So there's all kinds of applications evolving as we speak. So it's a big shift, but it's nothing new. I think every IT organization had a roadmap. It's just how we adapted to the situation.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned the sales motion. We've heard other organizations talk about that in terms of, obviously you can't take your customers out to lunch. Maybe you can do a virtual lunch, but you have to find other ways of engaging with them, right? And having the discussions that matter to the customer. So great observations. Christina, I know from you probably have an interesting take on this in terms of when you think about Oracle's business, includes cloud, includes obviously the well-known database, the applications, the workforce performance management capabilities. There's a whole range of products and services. Obviously, from your perspective, how have priorities changed as you look to get through the rest of this crisis and come out the other side?
Thank you, Brad. And yes, Oracle, we offer the entire stack. So we fuel from a global perspective customers, not only from a software, hardware, but certainly services perspective. So the headline, I always say, is moving from physical to digital. And let me give you 3 trend lines. Number 1, we're not thinking near shore, offshore, or onshore. We're thinking the digital shore. And how do we continue to, in many ways, look at that digital shore and how we will continue to invest in capabilities, whether it's touchless transactions or other ways that we really continue to look at that, maybe fourth shore. And we've even coined that as a new term, the digital shore. Second, we've actually seen a dynamic that's been pretty amazing with our customers. Now, we have to recognize that this particular period of time, we're all on an equal playing field, meaning everyone is working from home except for those critical resources. So we have been able to, in many cases, I'll use our CEO, Safra Katz, as an example. She's been amazing being able to meet with customers because now there's not that schedule, and being able to travel and being in another country and then having to, in many cases, travel to another place. I've actually witnessed her being able to meet with someone in Hong Kong, then meet with someone perhaps in Switzerland, and then to turn around and end the day with someone in the US. And that's a pretty amazing capability for her to get out and be with those customers. I've been on one call, and I can tell you she's as good in person as she is in a virtual setting. And she was meeting with a very, very important enterprise customer and their CDO, Chief Digital Officer, as well as their CFO. Second is absolutely the physical of investment in facilities to how do we literally rebalance our budget and look at more investment in technology. So this is an opportunity for companies to really look at, in many ways, their 3-year plan, an 18 to 36-month plan of where and how do they really want to rethink work. And how do you move from these physical buildings to, in many cases, more remote working, because we've seen it work for us, which has been very amazing. Now, let's use the third trend line, and this is with customers. Cloud, in my humble opinion, not just because I work for Oracle, but I've always been a huge believer in technology in terms of aiding and improving productivity. But we really see our customers where cloud was a good idea, it's now a business imperative. How can they move there? How can we help them move there? Collectively on this roundtable, how do we help customers move to that digital shore? Because this is the type of threat that no one has a crystal ball. So plan for the worst, hope for the best, and hopefully us as technologists and cloud providers, we can help everyone. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Great observations, and you know, we probably have, just like your CEO, we probably have other CEOs who are following the sun, so to speak, with their video engagements with customers around the world. It's a long day for them, but I'm sure it's very rewarding for them and for the business and for the customers. Russ, from your perspective at NetScout, what sort of reprioritizations have you folks made in light of this in light of this crisis?
So I'm going to look at it more from the perspective of our overall user community. And I do want to carry on the cloud discussion a little bit. I was looking at actually your network infrastructure market glance earlier today. And it's cloud and cloud-like deployments that are really kind of top of mind for most of our customers. You know, some, it makes sense for them to do public cloud. Others are really looking at private cloud technologies and how they're going to implement that. Where they deploy, who knows? You know, there might be private data center, it all depends. But the reality is the ability to spin up services as quickly and responsively as possible is really what people are looking for. They want to be able to adapt, right? And I think that the point that everybody made here about everybody being in a level playing field is certainly part of the situation that we've had. We've had a degree of forgiveness that has come back. I think Christina spoke to that in her earlier time. And I don't know that that's going to maintain. You know, I think that when we start to look at collaboration services, for example, people are starting to say, hey, you know, we got to take another look at who we use. This service isn't working for us. That service isn't working for us, and try to adapt and change. And I think we're going to see that happen in our user communities a little bit as well, that they're going to say, hey, you know what? I want to be seen as effective and instrumental in the success of the company as those that choose to come back to the office. So we're going to have to try and ensure that we have an equitable approach to delivering services to the new remote workforce.
Yep, absolutely, and I think that point is bang on. Bill, I know from a NetApp perspective, obviously, data is extremely salient to what you folks do. How have you seen requirements change or your needs change, and how are you reprioritizing for those?
Yeah, let me, first of all, great comments by the panelists here. Let me build on something that Christina said, because I really like that joining of cloud and customer, right? For us, migrating from on-prem storage solutions to true cloud-based, you know, point and click build outs of storage capabilities around the globe in a hybrid multi-cloud world is part of our journey. So we've been on this real focus on redefining the customer journey for the last 2 years. So going from traditional salespeople going out and meeting enterprise customers and developing that relationship to how do I reach out? What telemetry, what data do I glean about customers coming to our websites, trying our products, you know, bringing down pilot versions of software, and nurturing that experience through that journey as a true cloud business? That's really new to NetApp, right? And agree with what Russ said. I think we're all going to be cloud companies over time, and we have to exercise and develop some new muscles around those customer journeys where you don't necessarily reach out and touch everybody. Yeah. So I do a lot of executive briefing center sessions, and normally I would have done 2 or 3 visits on our California campus to briefings with customers and speaking with them, or maybe even hosting them as the executive sponsor in these meetings. I'm doing all that virtually now. I've accepted a couple of meetings coming up in a few weeks, one in India and one in Hong Kong. In the past world, I probably would have chosen to maybe go to one of those meetings and make it part of a visit to my teams in that region of the world. Now I'm doing both of them. And the only real change is I have to tell my wife I'm not having that glass of wine at dinner because I have to be cogent for the session later on in the evening that I'm going to do from afar. But we're bringing people in from around the globe. That's the expectation. Something that might have been a half-a-day session is now a 2-hour session. And there's a silver lining on a lot of these things. So we look at these as challenges we have to overcome. But there's really wonderful opportunities. So let me give you an example. In the past, maybe we would have had a hard time getting an SVP or a CIO into one of these sessions to talk about data rather than storage, because that individual wouldn't want to schedule travel or couldn't give up a whole day or a half a day to come to one of these meetings. Now you can surgically carve out a piece of time to go over the material they're interested in. They'll be part of this virtual experience for that period of time. So there's opportunity to reach out and touch and engage with our customers in a new way that's very positive and advantageous to everyone involved. And I think we have to look to leverage those opportunities and not sit and pine over the way we used to do business, which wasn't necessarily the way we were going to do business in the future anyway. So I think this new cloud era, really appreciating the customer journey and how we nurture those customers and take advantage of this in a truly digital environment, is something that we've all got to be passionate about to be successful.
Absolutely. As you had a chance to step back, you saw the opportunities rather than the risks or the drawbacks of the crisis, right? The opportunities that were suddenly available. And I think that's a very positive way and also a healthy way of looking at any crisis. Dan, from your perspective at Keysight, any changes in terms of the priorities, at least in the near term, that were occasioned by the crisis?
Well, a renewed sense of urgency for what a lot of our product teams are working on. So Keysight is helping to accelerate innovation to improve connectivity. Everything we're talking about with cloud comes down to being able to connect. Can you connect at scale? Can you connect at speed? And we have a lot of solutions we're working on, be it 5G to replace LTE for 2 orders of magnitude increase in bandwidth with much lower latency, or in the hyperscale data centers trying to bring 400 gig Ethernet to market, but down to the chipsets going to 5 nanometer inside of our smartphones so that we've got better power utilization of our compute devices. So we're working across all of those domains. And what we're pivoting to now is how can we accelerate our own work to bring to market these capabilities for everybody to better connect. And so our initial response was, how do we get everyone to connect from home? Now that everyone's home, how do we get everyone to thrive? How do we get everyone to reimagine how they work? And a simple example that kind of comes to mind for me, a lot of our software engineers, as Bill mentioned, it turns out are more productive doing their development work from home. That's great. But when we looked at our hardware engineers, we saw a steady decline. These are the guys who need network analyzers, oscilloscopes, signal generators, a whole garage full of equipment. Well, it's not surprising that our heritage, go back to the Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard days, the original HP electronic test and measurement business, that's Keysight, and it all started in a garage. Now we've got dozens, if not hundreds of engineers who have filled their own garages with equipment, and they're trying to connect all of this formerly unconnected equipment into the Keysight network, and we're trying to reimagine how would we do connectivity from people's garages full of instruments. That's a new priority. It hadn't even dawned on us that we might need to figure out how to do that. We just thought it was about bringing your laptop home and VPNing back into the home office. It's a completely different paradigm when you embrace how do people work in the new norm, and you look at hardware engineers in a variety of different roles and how what it's going to take for them to be productive.
Yeah, that's a big challenge, right? Telework, test and measurement, and almost HPC-like capabilities in some cases. That's a tall order.
Yep.
Absolutely. Veresh, I know F5 well from application delivery infrastructure. Within the company and without, in terms of customers, how have you reprioritized or reallocated resources?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say a reprioritization, but just a renewed focus and energy in terms of the things we were already doing. Over the last 3 years, the company has been on a massive shift from being a hardware company to a software company, and to enable our customers on their code to customer journey, and to be able to enable that in a multi-cloud environment. And so, we double downing on that and making sure we can accelerate to that path. There are 3 big focus areas for us right now. The first one is what we're calling digital agility. We believe that the primary competitive differentiator over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be digital agility. It's going to be an organization's ability to pivot and react and respond very quickly to market conditions. And the pandemic is a perfect example of that. So we're retooling our entire backend platform, system tools, people, processes, to be able to enable this level of digital agility. We focused on the overall workplace experience. We're focusing on automation everywhere and everything. We focused on self-service, self-solve. We focused on mobile and enabling mobile throughout the environment. We focused on, taking down these monolithic systems and moving to microservices-based environments. We also focused on redefining our ways of working. We now have a global distributed digital workforce. And how do we engage with these group of people in fundamentally new ways? So again, we're redefining, what we previously called our rhythm of the business. Well, that needs to fundamentally change. In the new ways of working, it calls for thinking about that fundamentally differently. So again, we're looking at tools, technologies, processes that just change the way we work with one another. And then the last thing that we focused on is what we're calling a unified customer and employee experience. We have what we call the infinity loop. We describe it as the buy side of the customer experience and the own side of the customer experience. And we're redefining in this new way of working fundamentally how that entire experience runs and operates. One of the panelists earlier talked about the sales motion. And yeah, we are fundamentally reinventing our sales go-to-market and our sales motion with clients. The number of customers that are now willing to engage with us from a remote support perspective. Before it was always, we're touching things in the data center and we want boots on the ground. We're now in an environment where they're actually comfortable with us doing a lot of remote support. So what does that look like in the new way of working? From a salesperson perspective, our sales engineers, their prowess around Zoom technology is unbelievable. It's off the charts. Who would have thought that unified communication, video, videography, and those type of skills are going to be required skills in the new way of working. But certainly we have that. So we're running a lot of training around how to run Zoom and video and lighting and mood and how do you create energy within a Zoom call. We would have never done stuff like that before. And so, you're starting to see invigorating, engaging remote conversations that otherwise wouldn't take place. But all said, I think it all still underpins this theme around human first and enabling digital agility. That's our primary focus right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. I just wanted to elaborate on just very briefly on something you said about automation. I only had so many slides I could present, but we saw a lot of enterprises come back in the surveys and say, yes, we recognize certainly from a data center out perspective and across the network, the importance of intelligent automation, right? That includes visibility across the spectrum and across the landscape where applications reside. Because as you said, there are times, as this crisis demonstrated, when you can't get people into buildings, and you need to be able to rely on automation as a core piece of any business continuity strategy going forward. I think great observation. Kevin, I wonder if you could provide some insight from Dell's perspective. I know to talk about obviously a company with an extensive portfolio and all the way from the endpoint to the data center and the cloud.
Right. I thought a lot of these comments were great. I think one of the things for us is, as we started coming around what we hoped wasn't going to be a big deal to, hey, this is really not good, to really now we have to kind of think about how do we sit in for the long haul here. And we started just trying to think about how to leverage our very broad spectrum of technology across Dell and VMware. We had a lot of comments about cloud and how we're doing cloud and multi-cloud and how we're doing our team member experience and enabling our team members to work from home effectively. There's one thing to pick up your laptop and go home, but then there was a universe of users who might not have even had a laptop, and how do we get them laptops and get them home and working well? How do we get our call center agents working at home, doing remote support, and managing that whole thing across the world where we have team members and assets all over, including in our factories, and how do we maintain I thought the comments on the maintaining team member safety and customer safety is for us was always and is still the top priority and everything. And so for us, we're taking a very conservative approach in terms of how we are looking at the problem, and honestly, we can work at home for a extended period of time and be effective because a lot of the technologies we have in our bag of tricks comes right from our own family in most cases. And it's been really great to focus in on kind of, hey, what does this long haul view look like? And how do we maintain more of that conservative posture in terms of whether and how we're going to come back, right? So.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to, I'll briefly get the panelists to touch on some of the long-term lessons that they're going to carry away from this crisis. Maybe I'll ask you to put on your prognosticator hats a little bit and touch very briefly on long-term lessons, and then what you expect in terms of long-term implications from this crisis. Maybe we'll start in the middle this time. We'll start with Bill.
Yeah, I would say, it's going to come down to two particular areas that are going to be very important to us. One is the customer, the whole customer experience, the customer engagement, and how we, we'll never go back to customer engagement that is the sales force embracing and loving our customers globally and very close. There'll always be a digital aspect of this, and we're going to have to find ways that work for our customers optimally and globally to really stay engaged. As somebody had made that comment early on, it really is going to be a global play in how we maintain the intimacy, in a meaningful intimacy, in a way our customers want to embrace and adopt the technology. So I think of that as kind of one bookend for us, is how we continue to get better and more nimble with that. The other side of this is how do we continue to innovate very effectively? How do we continue to collaborate? How does our innovation engineering, meaning our engineering core, continue to produce more compelling new ideas that support our customers and add value as a part of this diaspora? Because I don't ever see engineering coming back into a set of bullpens, closely located bullpens and cubes again, right? The talent is out there, the talent is dispersed, and I think we're going to reach out in this new world order and find that talent wherever it is at unprecedented levels. And we're going to need to collaborate and bring those engineering teams together productively through digital sinew. Right, so our collaboration tools, it's no longer going to be, am I running Teams or Slack, and how's that going for you? There's going to have to be whole new methodologies in linking those teams globally and around the clock to be maximally productive, to yield that benefit on the other side of that bookend for our customers. So I think those have to be, the fundamental principles. And then whether you're in IT or finance or legal or wherever else, you're going to go with the flow. But we're going to have to innovate globally, and then we're going to have to make sure that we're aligned with our customers in the new digital era.
Great observations. Russ?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think that, it's really all about digital transformation, right? I was reading an article with Nuj Kapoor from Cisco, an interview that he did. And he said, it may be the most overused word of the last few years, or term, but it's certainly what we're in the middle of, right? We are moving to a digital first society, and we've got to figure out how do we make this all work, and how do we ensure that the user experience is maintaining a high quality and secure service for our user communities and our customers, right? So it's all intertwined into how do we make this new digital frontier really work for us. So that's how I see it.
Excellent, excellent. And Christina, from the Oracle perspective.
Yes, I'll keep this short because I really liked what Bill and Russ said. I think it's going to change the way we live, work, play, and learn. And I absolutely believe, like any scenario modeling, we've done a discrete look, meaning we've been able to model this from a discrete perspective. Now we've got to look at how we model it from a continuous perspective, much, much further out, and what that means. But I absolutely believe it's going to change the way we not only live, work, play, and learn, but trust. I'll leave you with that. I believe that some of the reason why we may not have moved to this way of working as quickly as we have, and in many ways, the agility, the adaptability we've seen in these large enterprise organizations, 140,000 people at Oracle working remotely, I think we're all surprised. But I'll leave you with this element of trust. I really believe that now there's a new way of looking at remote work, and I think we're all learning to trust one another a lot more.
Excellent point. Excellent. And Pathmal, from the TATA perspective.
Yeah, so from our side, it's as Russ said, it's part of the digital transformation. I think the new normal is still yet to be defined. It's evolving, right? And we have surprised ourselves. I think we all have surprised our organizations with what we have accomplished in the last 3 to 4 months, right? And that's indicative of our roadmaps, our digital transformation journey. I think the technology will evolve, so do we. Our new normal will evolve, and it's the human adaptability that will sustain us as we move forward to drive that innovation to accelerate our digital transformation.
Yeah, humans have proven surprisingly adaptable throughout this crisis, and I'm sure that will continue. Yep. Kevin, perspective from Dell?
Sure, I think just the way that we work together is fundamentally changed forever by this. And one of the things that just strikes me sometimes is the organizations that are the best at adapting to this and or already have that muscle are a step ahead. And how all of us just get out there and figure out how to solve the problems that inevitably are going to come up and are out there now. And I think that will be what defines the next set of competitors who do the best out there. I really believe that.
Yeah, with resourcefulness and innovation playing a significant role going forward. Yeah, absolutely. Veresh from F5.
I think at the core of what we need to do going forward is this employee obsession. We really, we talk about customer obsession. I think we need to flip that script and really think about it from an employee perspective. We've demonstrated over the last 5 to 6 months that our employees have been resilient, have been responsive. It's just been amazing to navigate through this journey. I think as we move forward, we're going to see a fundamentally changing workforce, more distributed, more global. I think you're going to see the rise of the independent worker. And people are going to have way more choice, and they're going to pick based on companies reacted through this pandemic. So I think that's going to change, and we need to start moving away from things like employee engagement, which is really a measure of extraction of value from an individual, to things like employee fulfillment and employee happiness as a place for belonging and people to want to be. So I think that will continue to be a major long-term focus for us, coupled with innovation. On your opening slide, you showed that journey to innovation as we come out of it. Well, we cannot wait for the economy to recover for us to innovate. We have to innovate our way to get to the point of recovery. And so we have to fundamentally rethink everything we're doing. The phrase necessity is the mother of all invention. And so we are in a period of necessity right now, and it's time for us to innovate our way through it.
Excellent.
I think that will get us to where we need to be.
Excellent. And Dan, very briefly, and then I know we've got some questions queued up, a couple questions. So Dan, just some quick insights from you.
Yeah, just I'll go back to the word connectivity, and that we were reacting to the crisis and sending everyone home to reconnect. And I was reflecting on 10 years ago, the level of lack of connectivity we had, and how many industries and companies have been birthed in the last 10 years. Because of the connectivity that exists today. Now, fast forward another 10 years from now, when our connectivity in the developed nations is 10 to 100 times faster than what we have today, and imagine our connectivity reaches into a billion more citizens around the planet, and they're now connected as well, and what new possibilities will emerge in how we work differently. It's exciting times. Even in the midst of this scary pandemic that we're in, I think the possibilities, I think I heard a comment about a human ingenuity in navigating through this. I'm excited to see what we come up with in the next 10 years with just that's been forced upon us.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all the members of the roundtable, the panelists today. I really appreciated all of your perspectives. We got quite a variety of perspectives. There were some commonalities, and obviously in what you've seen, and that's understandable. One would hope that There is certainly some shared challenges and opportunities that have arisen as a result of this crisis. But I think we also heard some very unique perspectives from each of the participants as well. Do we have time? I don't know how much time we have. Do we have time for each of them to say a final word before we sign off, or?
As long as it's a word, because we
Yeah.
are out of time, but it's okay. maybe
right.
a couple of words. Okay.
Okay, a couple of words. Kevin, would you like to go first in terms of something you'd like to share with the audience?
Sure. Thanks for attending, and thanks for letting me be a part of the session. So really enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed the perspective of the other panelists. It was great.
Thanks. Veresh?
My couple of words are human first.
Yeah. Excellent. That's concise and powerful. Thank you. And Dan?
Just thank you everybody for the participation, and to my colleagues on the panel, great insights, and it was a pleasure to be on the panel with you.
Thank you. And Bill?
Yeah, I would just say human beings are the most wonderful of analog creatures ever developed. And for us to be able to morph and adopt and get comfortable with this digital uncertainty is a wonderful time to live through.
Yeah, analog humans adapting to a digital world. It's a great opportunity. And Russ?
Yeah, thanks to Mark and all the team at NetEvents for pulling this together. Thanks to my colleagues on the panel. I thought it was a fun discussion. And yeah, we're all in this together, so let's go get them. Be safe.
Excellent. And Christina?
Thanks to everyone. Stay safe, be well, and I hope to be on a call with all of you again.
Thank you very much. And Pathmal?
Thank you very much, all of you, and to the panelists, as well as to the audience and the organizing committee here on NetEvents, IDC. Adaptability, innovation to drive the digital transformation.
Thanks very much. And I think we're at the end of today's roundtable. Thanks again to everybody who joined.
Thank you.